You're listening to the Horseshoe Guys with Josh Carney and Jake Arthur. Your quest to find the most in-depth Indianapolis Colts podcast has triumphantly reached its terminus. Be sure to join Colts Nation's deep divers at horseshoehuddle.com, part of the Sports Illustrated Digital Network.
Hey guys, and welcome into the Horseshoe Huddle on Sports Illustrated podcast. We are the Horseshoe Guys. I am Deputy Editor Josh Carney, and that is lead analyst Zach Hicks. Zach, how you doing tonight this Thursday night?
Hey, pretty good, man. Can't complain too much. Getting closer to the season and the off-season stuff. I mean, I think we're only a couple weeks out from training camp right now. So
yeah.
Excited for that part.
Yeah, Colts report July 27th. First open practice is July 28th. Readers and fans of the Colts can get ticket information to training camp in Westfield on colts.com/tickets. So tonight is a little different. Usually you see me with Jake Arthur. We are going to do a Thursday show here, probably leading up to training camp and throughout training camp, either with myself and Zach or myself and our intern, Andrew Moore. Just depends on availability. But tonight I wanted to bring Zach on. Did a couple of huge pieces in the last few weeks. He's got another one we will talk about that's coming in the next day or so. I believe it drops tomorrow. But right now, Zach, I wanted to start out with the story you did yesterday on how the Colts used 13 personnel in the run game. Just tell listeners, what 13 personnel is. There seems to be a, misconception about what 13 personnel is at times. But tell us how the Colts use 13 personnel and how that can lead to success on the ground this year.
Yeah, so that article was kind of part of a series of articles I started when I first started with SI here was, kind of breaking down how the Colts run the football and how they're effective running the ball. The first one was on duo. Honestly, I was researching how they use pin-pull techniques on outside runs, and the Colts rarely did it last year. So I kind of had to scrap that whole idea as I was going through the film and try to focus more on the 13 personnel. And what 13 personnel is when you hear the 13 or the 12 or 21 personnel and stuff like that, basically that's just what type of players are on the field. So the first number is typically the number of running backs on the field. Second number is the number of tight ends. So 13, you have one running back and three tight ends on the field. And the Colts actually run 13 personnel. I believe they ran at the fourth highest rate last year, behind only, I want to say the Eagles were up there. There's a couple teams that were just a little bit higher than them, but it was only around 8% of their total plays. It was like 82 plays in total, but the Colts were really effective on it, and it was kind of a way to bring Jonathan Taylor back to his college days with heavier personnel sets and get him more comfortable. So they only really ran it, I think, in 3 games, really well, and it was the Steelers game, the Jaguars game at the end of the year, and the Bears game early in the season. But it was just another wrinkle to their offense. It was a way that you could really get Jonathan Taylor going, and they were able to attack defenses in multiple ways out of that. So I don't know how much they're going to use it this year with Trey Burton leaving and Kylan Granson coming in, because Granson's not the level of blocker that Trey Burton was or is, but I did like that wrinkle. I thought it was something that we could really go into and break down and show how they used, a kind of a jumbo set to use Jonathan Taylor's speed and power in the run game.
A couple of follow-ups for you there. You mentioned the Steelers game and the Jaguars game there at the end of the year. Do you think that they ran more 13 personnel at the end of the year, and that's kind of what got Taylor going? I mean, he closed the season pretty strong. Do you think that's something that we'll see right away in week 1? I mean, I know you mentioned Trey Burton's obviously gone, but there's a way for them to do something with Kylan Granson as that third tight end, or bring in a swing tackle as a third tight end. But do you think it goes hand in hand, that 13 personnel and Taylor's close to the year?
No, not necessarily, because, again, they only used it 8% of the time last year, and those were 2 of his better games, the Steelers game at the end of the year and the Jaguars game, obviously, in the last week. But I just think it was another way to kind of mix up the run game and kind of give defenses different looks. So, a lot of his success were on gap runs, outside zone runs, especially on those zone runs is when he was really, really efficient. And I'll eventually get to an article on those zone runs and how he was able to create on those zone runs to the outside. But yeah, 13 personnel is just kind of more like another wrinkle in with that kind of led to his success. I mean, a lot of his success has to do with just how well he played against those, obviously those poor defenses, but he played at a really high level. So 13 personnel obviously was part of it, but I wouldn't even call it really a big part of it. I think a lot of it was more so to do with him and just his feel in the offense. It got a lot better down the stretch.
Yeah. Do you think it could play a larger role this year? I know I kind of asked you that, but obviously losing Trey Burton and replacing him with a guy like Kylan Granson, you're going to lose some of that blocking there. But they have the depth along the offensive line to kind of move one of those tackles into a swing tackle role. Is that something we could see that percentage increase this year from the 8%, or is it just that's kind of where they're at, that 8% is going to hover around there because Frank Reich likes to do multiple things offensively?
I would probably guess around 8% is where we'll stay. When Frank Reich first got here, he ran at 5% of the time in 2018. 2019, they ran at 7% of the time. Last year, 8% of the time. So it has gone up each year. With Burton being switched out for Granson, I don't know how often you can really get 3 tight end looks out there. Maybe if you want to throw the ball more out of 13. You could get Granson out there and kind of show that jumbo set and then pull out a pass formation out of it. But I think probably around 8, maybe 9% at best we could see it at. As Taylor gets more acclimated to the NFL game, better feel for the game, you're going to use less of those jumbo sets because ideally in today's NFL, you don't want to bunch up the box. You want to keep as little defenders in the box as possible and as little linebackers and more safeties and corners on the field so you can run the ball more efficiently. So as Taylor kind of gets more comfortable running out of the shotgun and running out of more spread looks, you won't need to put as much 13 personnel or jumbo sets onto the field.
Yeah. Do you have the numbers on how often they threw out of 13 personnel? And obviously you did a lot of research on just that personnel setting. Do you know how often they threw out of that personnel setting?
Off the top of my head, and these numbers might be slightly off, but I believe they ran the ball around, I believe it was 50 to 55 times, and the rest, and it was 82 plays. So it was it was 60% run the ball, 40% pass. So they actually did throw the ball quite a bit out of 13. And I do think we could see that definitely show up more with Kylan Granson because of Kylan Granson's ability as a receiver.
Yeah, that would be a nice wrinkle to add, just to have that third weapon. I mean, obviously Trey Burton, I don't want to discount what he brought to the offense, but having a receiver at tight end like Kylan Granson could really open things up for this offense. Zach, you're working on another piece that should drop tomorrow. You spoke with Adam Dito. Is it 3D QB? Was that the group he's with? Obviously working closely with Carson Wentz. You've done a ton of work on the mechanics of Carson Wentz. If people haven't read that yet, just check out si.com/NFL/Colts. Look for anything Zach's written. It's fantastic stuff on Carson Wentz. Just really going in depth on, the former Eagles quarterback, what went right, what went wrong, where breakdowns happened in the last year with him. But you spoke with Adam Dito on the phone. Just kind of give us a preview of that article, what you learned, and what you hope to see from Wentz in 2021.
Yeah, so I would probably say the biggest thing I've learned throughout this process, especially dealing with a lot of 3D QB, Tom House is someone I talked to for an article recently. And it's actually funny when you look at 3D QB in the media and you look at Tom House in the media, it's always Tom House, right? Yeah. Tom House is the guru. He's the guy behind it all. And something I've kind of learned throughout this whole process is Tom House has not really had that much of a hand in the football side of it. He's worked with Tom Brady and Drew Brees, Joe Flacco early on. He did help with Andrew Luck during Andrew Luck's process. And he's been hands-on with a couple guys, but for the most part, in the last 10, 12, maybe even 15 years, it's mostly been Adam Dito. And he doesn't get the credit that he deserves throughout the media. And that's something where, I kind of learned throughout my conversations with him and Tom House where, Dito does a lot of this. I mean, if you look at Matt Ryan, Dak Prescott, Matthew Stafford, Carson Wentz, they have 28 of the 32 starting quarterbacks working with them. And primarily all of them have not even met Tom House. They've all worked with Adam Dito. So Adam Dito is the guy with 3D QB. He's the one who's developed the model that they use to train quarterbacks because I feel like everyone should know at this point, Tom House started as a baseball pitcher. Hey, drop that. He always goes for the squeaky toys when I'm recording. But yeah, Tom House started as a baseball pitcher, and that's kind of how they got their start into this. Yeah. So when they kind of moved over to football, obviously they had the mechanics part of it down and the throw and how to throw and stuff like that. But there's so many different variables when it comes to playing quarterback. As Dito said it best when I was talking with him, a pitcher can land on the same spot every single time. You can be in any field, any situation, but you can almost land on that same spot every single time when you're throwing it. Quarterbacks, you have to move so much. There's so many variables with your offensive line, with your play calling, with your receivers, that you're not going to land on the same spot or be in the exact same position every single time. So a lot of what we talked about was that when it came to mechanics, which was great. He talked about how quarterbacks can kind of maintain their mechanics throughout the season, which has been a big thing that I've been trying to get out of a lot of guys. I'm trying to talk to some quarterback coaches to really get a better feel for that, because that's probably the biggest question I have left before I conclude the series. And when we got into Carson Wentz, I didn't ask him too much about what they're specifically working on right now, like in terms of what drills they're doing and stuff like that, because, that's their kind of private stuff right there. That's what I wanted them to keep that kind of in-house with each other. But I did talk a lot about his mentality, like Carson Wentz's mentality and where Carson Wentz is mentally. And, I'll just say, the article will say it tomorrow, but Carson Wentz seems to be in a really great place right now. And it's not the biggest thing that I like to emphasize in the article. And whenever I put this stuff up, it's not that Carson's kind of like just relieved to be out of Philly. It's not like the sigh of relief, he can relax. It's not like that. It's like he knows that this is his next and maybe his last chance to really make it in the NFL. And he was dropped into probably the perfect situation for him.
Right.
So he knows that this is kind of a big opportunity for him, and he's ready to face that while also being a lot more at ease than what he was last year in that whole situation. So I'm excited for Carson Wentz. I'm definitely more excited now after talking with Dito than I was before, just from hearing that mentality and stuff that they're kind of working on. And yeah, Dito's really excited too. And a big thing is, a guy with that reputation, 3D QP, has worked with almost every quarterback in the league, from Matt Ryan, Dak Prescott, all those guys. He knows when to mince his words and when not to, when he's talking with a guy, because you don't want to attach yourself to something that you think might fail.
Right.
And, he wasn't mincing his words. He was completely 100% behind Carson Wentz. He thinks the Colts are going to have a great season with him at quarterback. And he wouldn't be saying that unless he believed it, because, again, he has such a reputation across the league. So he's excited. And, in turn, it kind of made me a little bit more excited. So I'm excited to see everything that kind of goes on with Carson Wentz and to see the progress of this when it actually gets to game time and preseason and even the training camp.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you brought up a good point. Like, obviously, Carson is a bit relieved to get out of Philly. I mean, obviously, he doesn't have to deal with that type of media in Indianapolis at this point. It feels like, regardless of the type of player you are, like when you come to Indianapolis, it's almost like you're slightly forgotten about. And I think that's a good thing for Carson Wentz right now. Absolutely. The one quote I wanted to read off that you had on Twitter from Dito was, quote, "This was by far the most work and the hardest he's worked with me." This is regarding Wentz. "He's not backed off 1 minute. I'm having to make sure he's getting his breaks and getting his body right. I think he will have the opportunity to operate more efficiently this year." To me, like, we've heard all offseason how Wentz has worked his butt off. He's tried to acclimate himself to his teammates, that locker room, really just trying to fit in. And to hear that he's putting in the work, like that's huge because, some quarterbacks of his level and his stature could just rest on their laurels and say, things didn't go right there. They gave up on me, but I know that I was doing the right thing. Like, he's owned everything, even when he first appeared on the Pat McAfee show right after being introduced in Indianapolis. Like, he's owned everything. Like, I could have been better. I could have been more of a leader. So to hear Dito's excited about him, I think that should get all Colts fans excited. And we have a couple questions about Carson Wentz coming up later on in our Q&A. But, you and I have talked privately in the Slack channel. Like, I think we have to temper expectations with Wentz because it feels like a portion of the fan base either believes he's going to stink and this was a horrible move, or he's going to be MVP Carson Wentz, and we've talked that 2017 season is a bit over-exaggerated in how good it was. If he can get to that 2018, 2019 level, I think the Colts are in perfect position. I wanted to go back to your just overall mechanics study with Carson Wentz. You've watched, at this point, I feel like you've watched every single Eagles snap that he's ever taken. What have you taken away from that study What's the biggest concern that you saw on tape with his mechanics? Was it his footwork, his ball security, just the inability to pull the trigger on some plays? What did you see that stuck out the most?
Yeah, so the part what I want to preface before I jump into this is I am still trying to learn about this. The biggest, I kind of like mark this series as being like chronicalizing my journey through learning about this aspect of quarterback play. Because honestly, quarterback position has always been one that I've ignored forever. As I'm trying to grow as an evaluator, I've hated the quarterback position. I just think it's so hard to watch. There's so many things that have to happen for you to really understand the situation the quarterback's in. You have to see the split second before the snap, split second after the snap. You have to see what the receivers are doing, the offensive line's doing. What was the play call? What was the design throw? And then you can really evaluate mechanics and if they're doing the right thing. So there's just so much involved. It's always something I've kind of ignored. And in this process of talking to Dub Maddox, Tony Rasiopi, Steve Calhoun, Tom House, Adam Dito, just ton of guys. And there's even more that I'm probably missing here. Greg Pinelli is another one who's worked with Josh Allen. I've learned so much about this. And the biggest thing really for me when I've watched Carson Wentz and that I've kind of been studying over the years is I do think he kind of gets in that bad habit of knowing that he has a big arm and he doesn't always use his feet and use his proper sequencing in his body to throw the ball because he has such a big arm. And it was definitely more of an issue before he started working with Dito in 2017. So 2016, he was almost all arm. And Carson Wentz would even admit that. In 2016, he was almost only throwing it with his arm, not using his lower half for much. And as a result, he had a sore arm quite a bit. And that's what Dito kind of had to help and kind of iron out and fix it. But I think we saw these last couple of years as his confidence dropped, he started going more back to those bad habits and using more of his arm than using his lower body and using the proper sequencing that it takes to throw it. Because honestly, the best way I broke it down in articles is when you're throwing a football, when you're already in your good position and you're throwing a football, your body should be moving like a baseball hitter. You know how a baseball hitter, you take that step and then the energy moves up through your body and comes up to your arm and then goes out your arm as you throw it. And what we see a lot with Wentz is he'll open that hip too early, so you completely cut off that energy moving up, and then it's all your arm. And then that leads to you either driving too hard, throwing the ball into the ground, or kind of leaning off your back foot and throwing it up and not getting as much velocity on it. So I think that's been the biggest issue mechanically. Obviously, I think confidence is a huge issue as well, which we can all talk about. That can be just confidence in his situation, confidence in his receivers, confidence in his offensive line. The more that he kind of lacked that confidence in that group around him, the more his mechanics started to deteriorate and he got back to bad habits because he felt like he always had to make the right play when everything around him wasn't right at all. So it's kind of a tough situation to keep your mechanics when you don't have familiarity with your receivers or your offensive line. But I think he got into some bad habits, and the biggest part of this series and the biggest thing I've been really trying to get to people and why I include like drills to fix these things at the end of each one of these articles is these are fixable. We've seen what Carson Wentz can be. We've seen 2017. We've seen 2018. He can be a really good quarterback in this league. He just got into some bad habits in some bad situations. And that's kind of been the biggest thing. These are fixable. Adam Dito is the best in the business for a reason. He can help him fix these issues. But it really comes down to Wentz's confidence and if he's going to properly, sync up that lower half and get back into good habits like he was in 2017 and 2018, which I think he's totally capable of getting back to it for sure.
Yeah, I've read too many takes this offseason that he's broken and unfixable, and that's just nowhere near the case. He's got good people around him. He's working with the right people, obviously, as you pointed out in this series. And just having that confidence back, I think, is going to be huge for him. Like, I've said this before on podcasts, like, he genuinely looks happy again.
Yeah.
And, if you're happy with where you're at and who you're playing with, that's going to, leak into your confidence. And Frank Reich's going to put him in the right situation. Like, I have full faith in Frank Reich. But again, I don't think he's going to be all of a sudden MVP caliber Carson Wentz, top 8 quarterback in the AFC like Mike Tannenbaum had this morning. Like,
I think a big thing with that is, it's going to be hard, but luckily this media market and this fan market's not as bad as Philly. So he's not going to get killed. But, those first 5-6 weeks is a really brutal schedule.
Yeah.
And that's just a tough turnaround. You go from such a bad situation, your worst career year, getting traded. So even if you are the most upbeat person in the world, you're going to have some doubts in the back of your mind about your own ability. And then your first couple games out, you have to go against the fire blitzes of the Seattle Seahawks and Aaron Donald with the Rams and the revamped pass rush that the Titans are going to have, even though it might not be great, but they do have a better pass rush than probably what they had last year with Landry and Bud Dupree. So, there's a lot of tough matchups there early. You have the Ravens with their blitz heavy. I think they blitz like 45% of the time.
Yeah, Wink Martindale likes to send the blitz.
Yeah, so it's a tough situation. I do think early in the year, even me as someone who's optimistic but cautiously optimistic about Carson Wentz, I do think those first couple weeks are going to be tough. And honestly, I'm not going to write them off after a couple of, even if they're I'm not going to say they're bad performances, but they could not be as great because, again, you're going against Aaron Donald, you're going against the Seahawks with those crazy fire blitzes, the Ravens with their blitzes. That's a tough situation, no matter how great your new situation is. So I'm not expecting him to come out the gate there on 400-yard games and putting the team on his back.
Yeah.
The Colts need to find a way to win those games, and hopefully he plays well. But we shouldn't kill him if he plays horribly, which I feel like we might, because we killed Phillip Rivers last year when he came out the gate playing poor. And look what happened towards the end of the year. He got them within a punching chance of Buffalo. You got to be patient with it. I'm optimistic about Carson Wentz, and even though I think he's going to be more in that kind of like 12, 13, 14 range or whatever in terms of quarterback play, which is perfectly fine. I mean, jumping up from, he was 34th, 35th last year. So I think 12, 13, 14, 15 range around that, I think that's perfectly fine. And this whole year is kind of like what you said with the broken thing. This whole year is about showing that Carson Wentz isn't broken. That's what this whole year is about. If Carson Wentz shows he can win football games for you, 2021 is an instant success, even if you win like 8 games total. Yeah. If Carson Wentz just shows the ability to win you football games, this year is a complete success.
Yeah, I think this is the experimental year, and 2022 is when they really are contenders in a sense. We have a couple questions about Wentz and could they bench him and all that, but this has to be, no matter what, you see what you have in Carson Wentz. Yeah. You have to put him in tough situations. You have to ask him to do stuff, especially late in the year. Like, go win us a game. We have to see if you're the guy. And if not, we just hit the reset button. I don't think that's going to happen right away. But, we can't go into this year as a fan base saying Carson Wentz has to be X for this to work. Like we can't have MVP. We can't have MVP expectations in year one. If he is top 15 this year, then sure, have that for 2022. But 2021 is all about just showing positive progress. If Carson Wentz plays well, and it doesn't have to be great, if he plays well, if one of Michael Pittman Jr. and Paris Campbell show that they can be legit playmakers in the league, and one of Kwity Paye, Dio Adeyembo, Ben Banogu, Kamoko Toure, one of those guys show they can be a consistent pass rusher, then this season's a success. You could win one game. I don't care. Just as long as those things happen, you can have every single other thing break down on the entire roster. But if you show me a pass rusher that steps up, a quarterback that steps up, and a receiver that steps up, I'm cool. I'm perfectly fine. Absolutely. So, that transitions pretty nicely into just a handful of questions that we got here. We have one here from Indie Sports Fan 65. What was the biggest thing Dito worked on when he was with Wentz? Quickly, I don't want you to give away too much from your article, but what's the one thing that you can kind of point to?
So, a lot of these questions are going to be about what he's worked with this year. Yep. And it's not really my place to really talk about what they've worked on. That's why I didn't really ask Dito too much about it. But I will say when I did kind of ask about working from the feet up and stuff like that, because that's what I told Dito what my research has mostly been about, is working from the feet up. And he did kind of confirm that to me when we were talking. So I do think a lot of it's been on that lower half, but I do think a lot of it's also kind of been on the mental, emotional, nutrition, sleep. That's a big thing of what 3D QB does too. They do focus on the mental, emotional, the nutrition, stuff like that. I think a lot of it's just kind of been getting him back into good habits and getting that confidence back up. So I got the feel that it was mostly from the feet up, kind of like I think Albert Breer's article said when they first mentioned Dito. But I think a lot of it's also that mental, emotional aspect of it, and I'm glad that they've attacked that.
Yeah. I did kind of highlight this one. This is from Sporadic Regularity at Sporadic Regular. What's more likely? Wentz receives MVP votes or the Colts bench him for underperforming in an attempt to not give up a 2022 first to the Eagles?
I would honestly, so I want to say it as like, this isn't me advocating for him being an MVP candidate, but I think it's much more likely the Colts are competing for a playoff spot than they are so far out of it that they're benching Carson Wentz.
Yeah.
So I guess I would say getting MVP votes, even though I don't think that, I mean, I could see him maybe getting one or two from someone who just loves Carson Wentz if they make the playoffs. But, I think it's way more likely they compete for a playoff spot or, make the playoffs than they are, like a 3 or 4 win team. And we saw this team win, 7 games with Jacoby Brissett and Brian Hoyer starting throughout the whole season. So I just think this team's too good for them to be so bad that they bench Carson Wentz towards the end of the year. That's
where I'm at. Like, I'm not advocating for Carson Wentz to receive MVP votes, although I do think there's one spiteful Philly media member that probably has an MVP vote that's just going to vote for Carson just to have him out there again and have someone say, how did this guy receive a vote? But, I think it's much more likely he receives an MVP vote or two than the Colts are 3-13 heading into week 17 or whatever. Yeah. Like, let's bench him, so we don't have to give up that first. So great question there, though. It definitely has you think. But this one is from James Harris at Coach Jameis. Hi, guys. There seems to be a preseason MVP every year. An example from years back was Caesar Rayford. Do you have one under-the-radar guy who you think blows up in the preseason this year? That is a great question. Haven't quite.
Yeah, I'm assuming we're talking about like the Ryan Delaire type and Chad Kelly type guys, the guys who probably aren't going to make the roster even if they do blow it up. Yep. I think Ryan Delaire had like 4.5 sacks in the preseasons back in 2018, and we all got upset when he got cut because, I was upset. I was really pumped about his preseason, but I would honestly say I think one guy who comes to mind, because, I feel like it has to be an offensive player because that's the guy who's going to pop, and Delaire obviously had a bunch of sacks and that's why he popped, but I'm going to go with Jet Anderson on offense, the running back.
Dang you.
You're going to go. Yeah. Because you got to think about it. Super productive college guy. He was a priority undrafted free agent. He stuck with the Colts all last season on the practice squad. I just think he's too talented to go against kind of like 4th and 5th stringers there at the end of the preseason games and stuff. But he probably won't make the roster over who they have. But I think he's gonna flash quite a bit in the game. Jet Anderson, you gotta, this is the guy who it's funny too. His name's Jet Anderson. I think he ran like a 4.6.
At the combine. He did not have jets,
but he was hurt at the combine. Like he had a hamstring injury.
That's true.
And he performed through it. So I do think he's quite a bit faster than that. But I like Jet Anderson. I liked him a lot in college, and I think he's going to have a good preseason, even if he doesn't really have a chance to make the roster.
I will go with Tarek Black. He's going to be on the field. He's probably going to be catching passes from Sam Ehlinger. Those two have rapport from their college days at Texas. Black was a former 5-star recruit. We saw him on All or Nothing at Michigan. He broke his foot, and that was kind of it for him at Michigan.
Yeah,
he has all the talent in the world. The production from college just simply wasn't there. I do think having a teammate like Ehlinger throwing him the football in preseason can certainly help him. So I'll go Tarek Black, and he's probably going to be on the practice squad, would be my guess.
Yeah.
Those are your 2 preseason MVPs. This is from UK Colts fan at UK Colts fan. Appreciate the correspondence from overseas. At defensive end, who do you think ends up being the forgotten pass rusher who gets left out of the rotation? It's got to be Ben Banogu, right?
I hope not. Gut says probably. Yeah. From all things I've heard, he's had a great offseason. He's really coming back determined and ready to take a spot. But at the end of the day, it comes down to coach preference and who the coach goes with. And we know that the coaches love Al-Qadim Muhammad. I'm assuming they like Isaac Rochelle since they just signed him. Kemoko Turay is always going to get his shot. So, I would guess Banogu, even though I really hope that's not the case. But I just think that's probably the most likely choice.
Yeah, Jake and I talked about this Monday. We would prefer to see the young guys. Isaac Rochelle is a fine depth piece. Al-Quadin Muhammad, fine depth piece, can play the run pretty well. But, man, if anything, you've got to see if Ben Banogu has anything as a pass rusher this year. And you mentioned it earlier, just talking in general. Like, I don't want to see Al-Quadin Muhammad or Isaac Rochelle on the field in passing situations. Like, I don't care if Banogu doesn't know his assignment. Like, just turn him loose at the quarterback. He has to play. You have to find out what you have. But unfortunately, my gut feel is he's the forgotten one. And that's going to stink to see. But, yeah, I can't see anyone else really, quote-unquote, forgotten. You know, like, Odeyingbo, when he's healthy, he's going to be on the field. Like, he's going to play.
I could see a scenario if Touré's not 100%, maybe.
Yeah.
But, again, they believe in him so much and his ability, even if, you know, he's only had 4 good games in his entire career. So it's tough to really have such super high belief in him.
Right.
Like, personally, for me, I would prefer to see Banogu out there than Touré, and not because I think Touré's a bad player, but just because I don't know what we have in Banogu. When Touré, I kind of feel like we know what we have a little bit. I mean, you know, you want to see him get back to the pre-injury, but, you know, you kind of feel like you somewhat know what you have with him. But Banogu, we literally know nothing at all. Like, we saw flashes his rookie year and then nothing last year. So it's like, who is he as a player? We don't know. So I'd rather see Banogu out there than Touré. But again, I don't see a scenario where they don't give Touré his chances. And I'm not saying that's bad. I mean, Touré obviously is a talented player. It's just I mean, I'm honestly of the mindset where if you're not going to play Banogu this year, you might as well cut him or trade him for a 7th round pick or something. You know, like, give him a chance somewhere else if you're not going to play him. There's no reason to keep holding on to him if you're not going to play him at all.
Yeah, I'm 100% with you there. I want to see him play. We need to know what we have there. Yeah. This one is from Rusty Lloyd. Best guess on who keeps the undrafted free agent streak alive? I think we're in unison here. I
think there's only one option, really, and it's Dion Jackson, the running back, to potentially beat out Jordan Wilkins for that 3rd running back spot. I don't think anyone else, like Tyler Vaughns doesn't have a chance, I don't think. Tarek Black would have to have an incredible camp in preseason. And the only other one is Isaiah Kafusi on defense. And, you know, he does play some Sam, so maybe. But, no, I don't see it. I think Dion Jackson is really the only chance outside of – I don't know if we count it for the streak, but if they – like last year they claimed Noah Tokiai right after final cuts. Does that count for the streak? I'm not too sure.
I mean, technically, it's an undrafted guy in his draft season. Yeah, it's tough. I mean, I don't know. I probably wouldn't count it because he wasn't their original UDFA, but if people want to count it. But, yeah, it's Dion Jackson. I don't think anyone else really has a chance. And I would not be surprised if he makes the roster, either due to a Jordan Wilkins trade or just an outright Jackson outplays everyone.
Yeah, the biggest thing with Jackson that I've kind of talked about is at the end of the day, like, if Jackson shows he can do what Wilkins does on special teams, you have to pick the 22-year-old with years of control over the 26-year-old who's a free agent next year. I think that's the biggest thing it comes down to.
That's just simple asset management.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what you have to do. So I think if that were the situation, Ballard would keep Jackson at that point. So.
Yeah, but Wilkins has a little bit of that cockroach aspect to him. Every year we talk about him being a surprise cut. And honestly, I've talked about this with Ashton Dulin before because I love Ashton Dulin, but when you're kind of a player at the bottom of a roster, you have to kind of be a cockroach. You know, you have to be this unkillable cockroach. And I think Jordan Wilkins has a good bit of that. You know, I think he's a good player and he shows that he has value. And every single year we say, oh, surprise cuts for the Colts, and it's a Jordan Wilkins picture every single year.
And he always makes it.
always makes it. And then he plays.
And he has a key role.
Yeah, absolutely. And he's a good player. So whenever I say, you know, he could potentially be cut for Dion Jackson, not speaking poorly about Jordan Wilkins. I love Jordan Wilkins. It's just one day, you got to figure he's going to move on somewhere else eventually.
Definitely. Yeah, I think, honestly, this could be the year. I think someone is going to come in with a, late round pick and say, Chris, take this. We'll take him off your hands, So.
Honestly, if you're Atlanta right now, you have Mike Davis and then nobody.
Yeah.
And you have that running style that Arthur Smith is bringing there. I would trade a late round pick for Jordan Wilkins. I mean,
yeah, that's one destination that Jake and I had mentioned. I also mentioned the New York Jets. I mean, they've thrown a lot at the wall at running back. They still haven't quite found it, and I just wonder if he could be that workhorse to take some pressure off Zach Wilson. So we'll see there. This one is from Jason Sanders at Weiss Soldier. Interesting at there. Who on this team do you project gets some national attention that hasn't really gotten it previously? That's a good question.
Yeah, that's a good one. Because I feel like, not to toot my own horn, but I feel like I did good last year where from talking to a lot of players, I had a good feeling that Grover Stewart was kind of going to be that guy who would break out. And he kind of did get some national attention, which is good. And this year, the guy I've kind of been talking about all off season whenever people ask is Khari Willis. I'm super high on Khari Willis. Did I take your pick as well?
We're on the same wavelength. That's fine. And I'm interested to see why you say Khari Willis.
So Khari Willis, he's been as steady as can be the first 2 years. But I think the best thing is, when you look at his first year, I believe he allowed 118 passer rating in coverage, which is not good at all. Last year, that came all the way down to, I think, 101 in coverage. So I expect him to have even better jump in pass coverage again this year. And I think he did a lot of good things in pass coverage last year, as well as always being a top tier run defender. I mean, he's been the top run defender his whole career. I think he's going to step up as a leader of this defense too, and he's going to be that kind of guy where when the Colts have primetime games, they talk about Khari Willis as being one of those leaders on the defense, and that's kind of where that national attention is really going to come in. So, great leader, great run defender. I think he's taking positive steps as a guy in pass coverage, and I do think I think this is the year where you don't hear him talked about as like a top 10 safety, but you hear him talked about as like Willis is a good safety on that back end that you have to be you have to be ready for.
Yeah, I think he's a fantastic leader, but I have to think that all the attention Julian Blackmon is getting nationally. More eyes are going to be on this Colts defense, specifically at safety. And, this happens with you and I watching all 22, whether it's the NFL or college tape. You're watching a guy specifically, and there's always one person that continues to flash. I think that's going to be Khari Willis this year. The other guy I was going to go with was Braden Smith. I mean, people within Indianapolis know how good he is, but I think it's slowly starting to get to a point where it's like, this guy's probably top 6 to 8 right tackle in the NFL. He's going to get a large extension. He's so smooth, and people forget he moved from guard to right tackle, had to learn a new position, and he has just been so steady. But yeah, I'm glad we're on the same wavelength there with Khari Willis. Like I love that guy. I know you talked to him coming out of Michigan State. He is an ideal safety for the Colts on and off the field.
Absolutely.
Couple more here. We have this one from Alex Wall at AWall1986. Do you feel that Bobby Okereke will take that next step to become a top-tier Pro Bowl caliber linebacker this year?
Man, I don't see Pro Bowl this year, but I think taking that next step and being a consistent starter is the big thing for him. We've seen the flashes. We've seen spurts of really good play from Okereke, but then we've seen like an injury and then play not as great when he came back. And then we've seen other things where it's been a lot of inconsistent play from him, but we've seen those flashes not only as a run defender, but also in pass coverage as well, which is the biggest thing because, this defense really doesn't have a truly like amazing coverage backer. Darius Leonard's great. He does a lot of good things, but they like to use him more as blitzer. Bobby Okereke, if he can really step up and be that above average to great coverage backer, I think that's a huge thing. So I just want to see more consistency from him. I want to see strong games in week 1, 2, 3, but also in week 15, 16, 17. I think that's the biggest thing for him, especially now, Anthony Walker obviously didn't eat into too many of his snaps last year, but there was always kind of that presence that Anthony Walker could step in and take his spot whenever. Now that's gone. It's 100% Bobby Okereke's spot. And I just want to see that consistency throughout the whole season. And obviously play a full schedule would be great. But yeah, just that consistency is so big for him this year.
Yeah, I think if we don't start to see that step towards Pro Bowl linebacker by 2023, you can be a little bit concerned. But this year, becoming the full-time guy, it has to be consistency. I think looking anything further than that, you're setting yourself up for failure in a sense as a fan or not meeting expectations. So consistency for Bobby Okereke this year, maybe Pro Bowl attention 2023 or 2022 for that matter. Actually, I went a few years too far there. Next year, not 2021, 2022 for Okereke. Couple more here. This one is from Claude CJ Harrington at Mr. CJ. He says, should the Colts be concerned about having a backup for Nyheim Hines? If so, is DeMichael Harris less expendable than we think, as he can potentially spell Hines or Campbell in case of injury to either? That's an interesting question. I mean, there's very few people in the NFL that have Nyheim Hines' skill set. So
yeah. I would say Dion Jackson could be more of a backup to him. And that was actually another big thing I pointed out with Dion Jackson potentially beating Jordan Wilkins for that last spot is, Wilkins can't really do the things that Hines does, and neither can Dion Jackson, but Jackson can do it closer to that level.
He can try and replicate it a bit.
Yeah, and he's a 4.3 speed guy too. Dion Jackson, we saw that in college. We saw when he got the open lane, he was able to hit that and break away some big runs. But
as a Syracuse alum, I know all too well about Dion Jackson breaking free into space.
Yeah. So, and to go with DeMichael Harris, I mean, I love DeMichael Harris. I'm really excited about him. I don't know where he fits on this roster.
Right.
And obviously he could be a backup to Paris Campbell. But the thing is, and I think a lot of people don't even think about this when they think of Zach Pascal, but Zach Pascal's most of his snaps come in the slot. So if something were to happen to Paris Campbell, like something happened the last 2 years with Paris Campbell, that's going to be Zach Pascal. It kind of always has been in terms of that gadget type role. Yeah, they could keep DeMichael Harris in that case. But I think DeMichael Harris has value. I want to see him make the team. I don't really see the avenue for it. But in terms of getting backups specifically for Paris Campbell and for Nyheim Hines, I think you kind of already have that with Zach Pascal and, potentially Dion Jackson if he makes the roster.
Yeah. This one is from Tyler Ward at T Money Culture. This is another Nyheim Hines question. Will Nyheim Hines get 1K all-purpose yards this year?
I'm going to say no because Carson Wentz typically doesn't throw it to running backs. He's, last year Hines led the team with 60 receptions, but that was with the quarterback who throws to running backs more than any other quarterback ever. And Nyheim Hines, I believe, had 980 all-purpose yards last year, 960, I think. So he was close, really close. I guess if you count returns, then he definitely hit over 1,000. If you count that for all-purpose,
I think those do get counted for all-purpose. So.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure he means by that question though receiving and rushing, if I had to guess. But I think there's an outside chance. But with Marlon Mack coming back and taking away some of those snaps, along with Phillip Rivers to Carson Wentz, it's probably not going to happen. But either way, Nyheim Hines is going to have a great season. Great player.
I hope that we see in training camp and early in the year that Frank Reich is preaching to Carson Wentz, hey, you have guys that can catch the football out of the backfield now. Please use them, because he didn't in Philadelphia. And that was always a little bit frustrating to watch. But this last one, this is from Mike Mifflin at Mike Mifflin 11. What is most important to the Colts' overall success? Wentz playing as a top 15 quarterback, the running game staying consistently above average, or the defense averaging at least a takeaway per game?
All of the above. All of the above is more. No, it's always the quarterback. Yep. It's always the quarterback.
It's the most important position in all sports.
Dude, you could get 2 takeaways a game and have a great rushing attack. And if your quarterback's in the bottom 10, you're not going to win football games. That's just how it is. As much as I want to say that getting a takeaway a game is huge and having a good running attack is great too, it's all quarterback. This NFL is all about quarterback. I mean, look at the teams that were there in the Final Four. You had Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, Aaron Rodgers, Tom Brady. You would argue that those were the 4 top quarterbacks in football, if not 4 of the top 5 in all of football last year. The quarterback play matters. And again, I'm not expecting MVP season from Carson Wentz this upcoming year, but I think a good season is the biggest thing that we can kind of ask for this next season coming up.
Yeah, and you'll occasionally get the outlier teams that have a poor quarterback but a great defense and a great run game, and they'll wind up in the Super Bowl, like Rex Grossman and the Bears, or
Sanchez.
Mark Sanchez in back-to-back AFC Championship games. You're welcome, Mike Tannenbaum.
I had to bring it up.
But but it's an outlier. Like today's NFL, it doesn't happen. You have to have the quarterback, plain and simple. It doesn't have to be the elite of the elite. I mean, we've seen in the last few years that's the case. But if you get good to above average quarterback play, you're going to be there in the end, and that's what's most important. I don't care if you have the 70s Steel Curtain or the 85 Bears or the 2000 Ravens on defense. That doesn't matter in today's game. It just it doesn't. You need the quarterback. And look, running backs are fungible. The run game is very fungible at this point. Like you can plug and play. It's all about the guy under center, and hopefully the Colts have that next guy. So we shall see. But Zach, that's going to do it for tonight. Is there anything you wanted to add before we jumped out of here?
No, I think I'm good. Just be sure to check si.com at 8 a.m. tomorrow, or whenever you wake up, jump over there to si.com. You can read about Adam Dedeaux and everything Carson Wentz that it's not everything I'm going to write about my conversation with Dedeaux. It's just a good bit of it. It's more of that kind of Carson Wentz aspect of it, and also the background of Adam Dedeaux. I think you guys are really going to enjoy it. It's just one of many that I'm going to write about it, but it's some good insight into the training that Carson Wentz has been doing this offseason.
Yeah. That's Zach Hicks. You can follow him on Twitter at Zach Hicks 2. You can also follow the show at Horseshoe Guys on Twitter. Check us out on online, si.com, NFL, Colts. It's Horseshoe Huddle. You can also follow the page on YouTube and on Facebook. For now, that's going to be it. We should return Monday, another episode of the Horseshoe Guys with myself and Jake Arthur. But yeah, like Zach said, continue to check the website on all things Carson Wentz. And we are only a few weeks away from training camp, thankfully. The dog days of summer are almost over for us in the media. So
finally.
Yeah. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in. Till next time.